Over the course of millions of years, dinosaurs were far more than just giant lizards that roared, ran, or leisurely ate plants as we see in movies. They were in fact extremely brutal, ferocious top predators, with behaviors bordering on psychopathic tendencies. And fossil records clearly present this bloody truth before our eyes. From Tyrannosaurus rex biting each other's faces, to Majungasaurus unhesitatingly cannibalizing its own kind, to Stegosaurus viciously piercing enemies with its spiked tail. These seemingly cruel acts were, in fact, the most normal laws of survival in the prehistoric world. Today, let us travel through time and uncover the true and shocking side of these prehistoric killers through those silent, yet powerful fossil evidence. We start with the most famous Tyrannosaurus rex. Numerous shocking facial bite marks are often found on the skull fossils of Tyrannosaurus rex. According to statistics, among the discovered specimens, there are as many as 324 such facial bite wounds. The famous stand Tyrannosaurus rex skull has a distinct puncture wound that has clearly healed. The vast majority of these bites came from conspecifics, indicating that Tyrannosaurus rex often engaged in brutal facial attacks against each other. This behavior was likely a form of ritualized social interaction, or a fierce contest for dominance. Even more shocking is that Tyrannosaurus rex even exhibited clear cannibalism. Fossil evidence shows that Tyrannosaurus rex teeth left deep bite marks on conspecific bones, even on parts such as toes. Next, let us turn our attention to Majungasaurus. Scientists have found clear conspecific bite marks on Majungasaurus bone fossils. These bite marks strongly prove that when food was extremely scarce, they would not hesitate to eat their own kind. The extremely arid desert environment of Madagascar at that time made all food resources extremely scarce. Therefore, cannibalism became a cruel measure they had to take to survive under such extreme conditions. The case of Allosaurus is equally shocking and chilling. In some bone bed sites from drought periods, up to 17% of the bite marks were actually from conspecifics. Most of these bite marks were concentrated on bony areas with little meat. This clearly shows that they only resorted to such behavior when extremely hungry and desperate. Daspletosaurus also left numerous records of healed facial bite wounds. After being injured many times, it still could not escape being eaten by its own kind in the end. This fully demonstrates that cannibalism was actually quite common among tyrannosaurid dinosaur groups. Mapusaurus shows us the tragic and risky side of group hunting. A group of 7 Mapusaurus once cooperated to attack a giant Argentinosaurus together. As a result, they all sank deep into the mudflat and eventually died together. This was a typical tragic disaster caused by group hunting. Spinosaurus was a typical ambush killer. It would suddenly leap out of the water to attack pterosaurs and other unsuspecting prey on the shore. Fossils clearly record Spinosaurus teeth deeply embedded in the bones of other animals. It also often lost its own teeth during fierce battles. This crocodile-like ambush tactic made it the absolute ruler of the riverbank area. The group hunting behavior of Utahraptor also staged similar tragic tragedies. When a group of Utahraptor hunted frantically in the mudflat, they collectively fell into a fatal predicament. In extreme panic, they trampled each other and eventually died collectively. This vividly reminds us that although group hunting is powerful, it can sometimes backfire. Deinonychus was also a fierce and efficient group hunter. They would hunt in groups to jointly besiege those huge Titanosaurus. They even fought fiercely with their companions when competing for prey carcasses. Fossils show that during frenzied feeding, they would roughly drive away approaching companions with their claws. This nearly crazy feeding scene is extremely rare and shocking in the fossil record. Velociraptor has left us a famous fossil specimen of a deadly fight. A velociraptor and a protoceratops both fell dead during a life-or-death struggle. They were instantly buried by a sudden sandstorm, perfectly preserving their final fighting posture. This fossil is like a time capsule, perfectly recording the last moment of their life-and-death battle. Gorgosaurus also left a large number of impressive facial bite records. Among adult individuals, a full 60% had obvious facial bite marks. This was likely a ritualized behavior to establish social hierarchy through fighting. Early Coelophysis was once thought to exhibit cannibalistic behavior, but later in-depth research found that this was actually a misjudgment in early scientific determinations. Nevertheless, they still lived in an extremely competitive and ruthless survival environment. Triceratops used its sharp horns as powerful weapons to fight against terrifying predators. Fossils clearly show fatal puncture wounds left by Triceratops' horns on Tyrannosaurus rex. This strongly proves that even herbivorous dinosaurs could become dangerous opponents that strike fear into predators. The iconic tail spikes of Stegosaurus were its most famous and effective weapon. These tail spikes once deeply pierced the bones of Allosaurus. Even some Stegosaurus tail spikes showed damage marks from battles. This indicates that they often relied on their tails for powerful self-defense counterattacks. The tail club of Ankylosaurus was even more powerful, a veritable prehistoric heavy weapon. One swing could easily break the bones of conspecifics or predators. Ankylosaurus sometimes attacked each other fiercely with their tail clubs. This shows that they were equally fierce and unforgiving in intraspecific competition. Pachycephalosaurus was a famous master of headbutting. They slammed into each other fiercely with their exceptionally hard skulls. Such collisions often caused severe concussions and even subsequent infection risks. Many Pachycephalosaurus fossils show severe permanent scars as a result. These skull collisions were likely ritualized behaviors when competing for mates or territories. Overall, the violent behaviors exhibited by these dinosaurs far exceed the imagination of modern humans. They integrated violence deeply into their daily survival and social structure. Fossil evidence has opened a window for us to see a prehistoric world far crueler than imagined. The facial biting of Tyrannosaurus rex is just the tip of this cruel iceberg. The cannibalism of Majungasaurus deeply reflects the enormous survival pressure brought about by extreme environments. The crazy behavior of Allosaurus during long droughts is also deeply shocking. The multiple injury marks on Daspletosaurus are both sympathetic and incredibly real. The tragedy of Mapusaurus group hunting reveals the hidden risks behind teamwork. The sophisticated ambush tactics of Spinosaurus perfectly adapted to the complex environment of riverbank wetlands. The mudflat disaster of Utahraptor constantly reminds us that the hunting path is full of unknown dangers. The frenzy of Deinonychus during feeding fully reflects the fierce survival competition in the primitive world. The death embrace of Velociraptor and Protoceratops has become the most eternal fossil record in paleontology. The facial bite marks of Gorgosaurus deeply reveal the cruel nature of the establishment of their social hierarchy. The story of Coelophysis also reminds us that the process of scientific exploration always requires constant revision and improvement. The horns of Triceratops strongly prove that herbivores were not always vulnerable. Stegosaurus tail spikes repeatedly played a key self-defense role on countless battlefields. Ankylosaurus tail clubs were not only used for defense, but also equally lethal in intraspecific conflicts. Pachycephalosaurus head-butting collisions often resulted in serious and even fatal consequences. In the eyes of paleontologists, these violent behaviors were normal strategies formed by dinosaurs to adapt to their environments. Violence was never abnormal, but the most ordinary daily life in that prehistoric world. It was through violence that they could effectively compete for resources, establish status, and seize every opportunity to survive. Those silent fossils allow us to glimpse that cruel, yet extremely real world. The bite marks on Tyrannosaurus rex skulls tell us that even top predators must always be wary of each other. The cannibalism of Majungasaurus was a helpless yet cruel choice in an extreme famine environment. Allosaurus bone bed sites record the desperate survival struggles during drought periods. The scars on Daspletosaurus are the best proof of its many bloody battles. The collective death of Mapusaurus was a heavy price to pay for group hunting. The traces of Spinosaurus teeth embedded in other bones fully demonstrate its ferocity as an ambush killer. The chaotic trampling of Utahraptor was a painful consequence after group action spiraled out of control. The fighting of Deinonychus driving away companions with claws reflects the primitive madness during feeding time. The death struggle fossil of Velociraptor and Protoceratops remains the most precious treasure in paleontology. The facial rituals of Gorgosaurus are a unique and cruel way for them to establish social order. The story of Coelophysis also reminds us that science is always advancing and revising. Triceratops' horn wounds prove that herbivorous dinosaurs could strongly counterkill predators when necessary. Stegosaurus tail spikes left permanent and powerful battle evidence on fossils. Ankylosaurus tail clubs were both powerful defensive weapons and lethal tools in intraspecific conflicts. Pachycephalosaurus skull injuries were often accompanied by the dual risks of concussion and infection. These amazing discoveries have completely changed our traditional perception of dinosaurs. They are no longer mere giant animals, but intelligent beings with complex violent cultures and behaviors. Fossil evidence presents us with a more vivid and cruel prehistoric Earth. In that era, violence was their most direct and effective language of survival. Cruel competition profoundly shaped their physical structure and behavioral patterns. Today, it is through these precious fossils that we have reproduced that bloody and true history. The true face of dinosaurs is far more shocking than any movie depicts. Thank you for watching. We hope this video has given you a new understanding and awe of that distant prehistoric world.